Picture this. It's July 2023. The Good Vibes Festival in Kuala Lumpur is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Sold-out crowd, big international lineup. The kind of event that every tourism board dreams about. The sort of thing you put in a reel to show the world that your country is open, modern, cosmopolitan. The 1970s are headlining. They walk out. And then, 7 songs in, something happens that the Malaysian government did not plan for, and that would reverberate through the country's tourism industry for the next 3 years. The frontman criticizes the country's anti-LGBTQ laws. He kisses his bandmate on stage. The performance is cut short. The following day, the Ministry of Communications and Digital issues an immediate cancellation directive, and the entire 3-day festival is shut down. The band is banned from Malaysia. The organizer, Future Sound Asia, describes the financial fallout as catastrophic and files a multi-million-dollar lawsuit in the UK High Court. Multiple other artists cancel their Malaysia shows in the weeks that follow, and Malaysia's government responds by introducing something that no other country in the world's concert market has: a mandatory kill switch at every foreign artist's performance. Physically cut the power. End the show. Instantly, if an artist says or does anything the government considers offensive. 75,000 people showed up to watch Coldplay at Bukit Jalil National Stadium 4 months later. The kill switch was ready. Attendees were reminded to dress appropriately and not display anything that might cause discomfort. Police warned the public to avoid provocation. The Prime Minister justified allowing the show partly by noting that Coldplay supports Palestine. And Time magazine ran a piece that called the kill switch emblematic of the precariousness that now hangs over international performances in Malaysia. That is not a headline Malaysia's tourism board puts on its promotional materials. But it is the headline the world reads. And it is the headline that shapes what a certain category of very valuable tourists decides to do with their travel plans. Let's talk about who actually visits Malaysia right now, because the distinction matters enormously. In 2024, Malaysia welcomed 37.96 million total visitors. Sounds incredible, but break that number down and what you find is this: 25.02 million of those were overnight tourist arrivals. The other 12.94 million were excursionists, day trippers, predominantly from Singapore, Thailand and Brunei, crossing the border to shop, eat, fuel up and go home. The average excursionist spent 348 ringgit per trip. The average overnight tourist spent 4,086 ringgit. Those are not remotely the same contribution to the economy. And within those overnight tourists, the geographic source markets tell the full story. Number 1, Singapore. Number 2, Indonesia. Number 3, China. Number 4, Thailand. Number 5, Brunei. Look at what's not on that list. Not a single long-haul Western market in the top 5. Not Europe, not Australia, not North America, not Japan, not South Korea, which is still 29% below its 2019 arrivals in Malaysia. The tourists who book the most expensive resorts, who stay the longest, who visit Borneo's rainforests and dive Sipadan and spend 10 days exploring Penang's heritage streets. Those tourists are not coming back in the numbers that pre-pandemic Malaysia counted on, and there are specific, documented, honest reasons why. Some of them Malaysia can fix. Some of them reflect genuine tensions about what kind of country Malaysia wants to be. Now, before you say, but Malaysia has strict cultural laws that are part of its identity and sovereignty, you're right. That's a legitimate argument. The point isn't that Malaysia should abandon its laws. The point is that specific policies have measurable, documented effects on which international tourists choose to visit, and a country that is spending 550 million ringgit promoting itself to the world needs to understand those effects clearly, not look away from them. Let's start with the most direct one. Malaysia's penal code criminalizes same-sex intimacy with penalties including up to 20 years in prison and caning. This is federal law that applies to everyone on Malaysian soil, regardless of nationality. The US Department of State's travel advisory for Malaysia specifically flags this for LGBTQ+ travelers. The Canadian government does the same. Every major Western travel advisory platform rates this as a significant risk factor. What this means in practice for tourism is that a segment of the Western market, not a small segment, self-selects out of Malaysia entirely. LGBTQ plus travellers who might otherwise be planning a luxury resort week in Langkawi, or a dive trip in Sabah, or a food tour through Penang choose Bali instead, or Thailand, or Vietnam, none of which criminalise their existence. And LGBTQ plus travellers represent a significant portion of premium leisure spend globally. They are statistically higher income, higher spend, and more likely to travel internationally. Malaysia is not just losing them on principle, it is losing them economically, at exactly the segment of the market that the tourism board claims it wants to attract. Then there's the concert and entertainment problem, which is a different dimension of the same underlying issue. After the kill switch became mandatory, concert promoters across Southeast Asia started having a different conversation about Malaysia. Artists' management teams began asking harder questions before committing to Malaysian tour dates. Time magazine documented it. The kill switch was deterring international artists from booking Malaysia. Concert promoters told the press openly that they were finding it difficult to convince artists that the kill switch wasn't intended to limit their creative freedom. In 2013, Beyoncé had cancelled a planned Kuala Lumpur concert due to Islamic group protests. Keisha's concert was cancelled by authorities one day before it was scheduled. Now there's a mandatory power cut mechanism at every foreign artist show, actively monitored by 2 to 6 government officers, supported by police and religious authorities, with authority to end the event instantaneously. The concert industry is a multi-billion-dollar tourism attractor. People book flights specifically to see artists perform. They fill hotel rooms. They spend money in the city for days on either side of the show. They post about the country to their followers. Every artist who decides the regulatory environment isn't worth the risk is also deciding not to bring thousands of their fans through Kuala Lumpur. Here's where it gets interesting, because the hotel data tells the story that the headline arrival figures hide. The Malaysian Association of Hotels has its own occupancy tracking system. In the first quarter of 2025, despite 6.74 million tourist arrivals during that period, a significant number, hotel occupancy and room rates were described by the MAH president as flat. Her words, "Yes, we're seeing more inbound travellers, especially from China, but not as many as anticipated." Geopolitical tensions led to last-minute cancellations, including a major corporate group booking at a 5-star Kuala Lumpur hotel. Pre-pandemic, Malaysia's hotel average occupancy rate was 65.51% for the first 9 months of 2019. The sector has been grinding back toward that figure through the recovery years. The problem isn't just volume, it's yield. Rooms in Malaysia, particularly mid-range and budget properties, are under intense pressure from an unregulated short-term rental market that the industry has been screaming about for years. The Malaysian Budget and Business Hotel Association declared that the proliferation of unlicensed Airbnb-style properties was creating a parallel illegal accommodation economy. No licensing compliance, no fire safety checks, no health standards, no tax contribution, competing directly on price while formal hotels absorb all the costs of operating within the rules. Tourism Malaysia set a target of 35.6 million international tourists for 2026. The formal hotel sector cannot fully capture the value of those tourists if a significant portion of the accommodation market operates outside the regulatory framework entirely. You can fill an island with visitors and still have hotel owners struggling with occupancy because the people who came are sleeping in unlicensed apartments that don't appear in any official data. This is the gap between the numbers Malaysia announces and the reality on the ground that resort and hotel operators are living with. Let's be real about what's happening with the specific premium resort market, the empty resorts part of this equation. Langkawi was, for decades, one of the strongest performing luxury resort destinations in Southeast Asia. Duty-free island, extraordinary beaches, UNESCO Geopark designation, world-class resorts, genuinely beautiful. European and Australian resort guests, the ones who spend the most per night, book the longest stays, hire guides and charter boats and eat at the restaurants, made up 80 to 90% of some operators' bookings before the pandemic. By 2023, that figure had dropped to around 60% for established operators on the island. The explanation is not one thing. It's accumulation. Fewer direct European routes into Langkawi. Price competitiveness eroded relative to Bali and Koh Samui. Then, in 2023, the Kedah state government, which governs Langkawi, floated the idea of banning alcohol sales on the island. The chief minister later clarified that Langkawi's duty-free status falls under federal jurisdiction and the state government couldn't interfere. But the international travel trade doesn't wait for clarifications. It reads headlines, and the headline that circulated through European and Australian travel agent networks in late 2023 was "Langkawi may ban alcohol." Bookings for the following year went elsewhere. That's how the premium resort market works. It is fragile. It responds to perception faster than reality. And once a destination acquires a reputation for ambiguity, will things I value be available here? Am I welcome here? It takes years to rebuild. Then there's the marine product. Semporna in eastern Sabah contains some of the best diving on the planet. Genuinely world-class coral systems, extraordinary marine biodiversity, the kind of underwater experience that fills resort beds with long-staying, high-spending international dive tourists. In early 2026, a dive instructor's post went viral showing plastic waste covering the waters around the dive sites. Domestic waste pollution from water villages and on-island communities had been accumulating for years without proper rubbish collection infrastructure. The response online was immediate and global. Divers in Europe and Australia who had been planning Sipadan trips started asking whether the product they'd read about in dive magazines still existed. The reef does still exist. The experience is still extraordinary, but the damage to the perception of the product, at precisely the moment that Malaysia is trying to re-attract premium long-haul divers, is real and was entirely avoidable. So what does this add up to? Here's the framework. Malaysia is genuinely attempting to rebrand itself for Visit Malaysia 2026. It has poured 550 million ringgit into the campaign. It has secured genuine wins. Chinese arrivals, regional markets, MICE tourism, some extraordinary luxury hotel openings. It has real assets. The food alone is world-class. The cultural diversity of Penang and Malacca is authentic and extraordinary. Borneo's natural assets are among the most spectacular on Earth. None of that is in question. What is in question is whether the premium Western long-haul market, the visitors who fill expensive resort beds, hire specialist guides, pay for multi-day dive packages, book business-class flights, is being attracted or repelled by the sum total of signals Malaysia is sending about what kind of experience they can expect. Right now, those signals are mixed at best, a kill switch on creative expression at concerts, criminal laws that apply to same-sex relationships, regardless of the visitor's nationality, an alcohol policy that creates regulatory uncertainty in the country's flagship resort destination, an unlicensed short-term rental market that undercuts formal hospitality operators, a marine product at some of the world's best dive sites being threatened by waste infrastructure failure, a tourism minister who opened Visit Malaysia year 2026 by publicly acknowledging that tourists are being treated unfriendly by locals. These are fixable problems. Not all of them, and not without difficult conversations about the relationship between cultural and religious values and international commercial tourism, but they are identifiable, specific, and addressable. First, get serious about the entertainment regulatory environment. The kill switch is a global embarrassment for Malaysia's concert industry. Replace it with a clear, published standard of conduct that gives international artists and their management teams predictable, consistent expectations. Concert tourism is premium tourism. Protect it. Second, ring-fence Langkawi from religious policy ambiguity. Make it permanent, formal, and internationally communicated that Langkawi's duty-free and culturally permissive status cannot be altered by state government intervention. One headline about potential alcohol bans cost more in lost bookings than any single promotional campaign can recover. Third, enforce the waste management infrastructure at Semporna and other marine tourism zones. Fund the rubbish collection that protects the asset that premium dive tourists are coming to see. This is not an optional upgrade. It's basic protection of a tourism product worth billions of dollars annually. Fourth, regulate short-term rentals seriously. The hotel sector has been asking for this for years. Unregulated accommodation doesn't just damage hotel occupancy. It exposes tourists to unsafe conditions, removes tax revenue from local government, and creates a two-tier market that formal operators cannot compete on. Fifth, be honest about the trade-offs. The policies that create friction for Western long-haul tourists are not going away, and in some cases they reflect genuine majority values. The Honest Conversation is about how to build a tourism product that works for the audiences Malaysia actually wants to attract, rather than announcing targets for 35 million visitors and then being surprised when European bookings don't materialize. Malaysia's resorts are not empty because nobody wants to visit. They are running below potential because the signals reaching the audiences most likely to fill them at premium prices are delivering mixed messages. The food is extraordinary. The nature is extraordinary. The culture is extraordinary. Tell me, if you've been to Malaysia or been thinking about it, what made the decision for you? What did the brochure promise that the reality confirmed or didn't? Drop it in the comments. The honest account of what's actually happening here matters, and you're part of that conversation.